There you go, everyone's popping up. Okay. Right, should we get started? So, good afternoon, 12 o'clock on the dot, everyone. Welcome to the latest Your Essex Community online learning series topic. My name's Lee, I'm a relationship manager at the Active Essex team. And I'm here today as the host, and I'll be shortly welcoming my colleagues from Sport for Confidence who are going to take us through this afternoon's session on lived experience leadership. So before I go into that, just some very quick housekeeping. So today we're going to have a presentation with the opportunity to ask lots of questions too. So please do make sure that you have, if you have any questions, put them in the chat function. We'll make sure that we answer them at the end of the presentation. Today's session is going to be recorded as well. So if you're viewing this live, you'll receive the link to that straight after today's session. But we will also make sure that goes onto the Your Essex YouTube channel too. So colleagues who can't be with us kind of live today have the opportunity to be able to watch that in their own time. And just to share that today's session is part of the wider Your Essex community offer. And I just want to very briefly touch on kind of some of the other opportunities and resources available through Your Essex community. So Georgia, if you wouldn't mind just going on to the next page, please, just to share that currently available through the Your Essex Community Programme is an e-portal. So this is a digital element of the Your Essex Community offer. It provides advice, resources across a range of different topics such as governance, safeguarding, trustee support, volunteer management, and also some of the latest news. We are having an online learning series session on the e-portal, as well as some legal structures advice, which I'll kind of detail later on in today's session. But this is constantly adapting. There's lots of resources being added to that. So there's a link there and an opportunity to go and access that at a future date. We also have a community participation element as part of YEC or Your Essex community. So next slide, please, as well, Georgia. So this is an opportunity for organisations that want to work strategically to create a culture that really values and empowers active and engaged communities. As part of the offer is a community of practice, which is county-wide, which is growing momentum. And through that, there's opportunities around sharing learning through particular case studies or good practice from charities and community groups around how they've really engaged communities in their programming and as part of their core offer. So that is really starting to grow momentum now. Again, there's an opportunity through that QR code and that link there to be able to sign up to that community of practice if that's something you're interested in. And then finally as well, there is a place-based support offer, which is currently being refreshed for 26-27. And this is all about providing capacity and capability locally, building local networks, supporting local organisations with training, events and learning opportunities, of which kind of our county-wide online learning series is part of as well. So that's something that Active Essex lead on. The facilitation of, so please do take a look at some of the opportunities available in your places after today too. So that leads us back to today and today's online learning series. So I want to give a welcome to, I believe, Georgia, who is going to be our kind of main facilitator this afternoon alongside Andy and Louise. So today's session is going to really explore why lived experience matters, how you can create cultural shifts, how to design services with and for people with a variety of different needs, and what it takes to share power and work ethically. So hopefully you're going to gain some practical tools alongside a space for some discussion, some challenges, some peer learning, and potentially lots of opportunities to ask some questions. So Georgia, Andy, Louise, welcome. Over to you.
Perfect, thank you. So yeah, hello everybody. We're here today to talk about leading with lived experience. So as Lee said, how to include and elevate voice of lived experience within your organisation. I'll be honest, this is a massive topic for us to get into an hour. So we'll really try and do it as much justice as possible, but we do encourage you to kind of reflect after. And if you've got any further questions after today, do please come back to us. And yeah, we'll get started. So sorry, my clicker is having a moment. There we go. So just wanted to introduce ourselves first for those who might not have met us before. So my name is Georgia. I'm an occupational therapist at Sport for Confidence in the learning arena space. So very much working on the kind of workforce development arm where we're going out and sharing our learning about the power of physical activity and sport, and the opportunities for the benefits from that and how we can support people to belong and really break down those barriers to accessing sport and physical activity in a range of places and spaces. So that's where my role kind of focuses at the moment. And then I've got the lovely Andy with me as well today. So I'll meet myself.
Hello, everybody. So I'm also an occupational therapist like Georgia. And I also have lived experience of, so I have, and bring that to importantly to my role. I live with cerebral palsy, and so I have experiences of accessing occupational therapy services myself, and actually including as a Sport for Confidence participant. I attend one of the gym sessions that's run in Waltham Forest. So I have actually additional skills and qualifications around exercise for the disabled population, and have worked in a specialist leisure centre for the spinal injury charity Aspire. I co-lead on an initiative helping to elevate the lived experience voice of Sport for Confidence, and that's called Team Experience, which we'll talk more about later. And I'm supported by my colleague Louise, who is also my Access to Work funded support worker, to do this as well. I'm really very grateful to Georgia for leading on a lot of the content, as I can find it difficult to articulate myself for long periods. So thank you, Georgia.
Perfect. Thank you, Andy. Glad to be doing it together. It's been really nice to work on this together. So yeah, just wanted to introduce a bit about Sport for Confidence as well. So for those who might not have heard of us before, so Sport for Confidence, we're a community health team made up of occupational therapists and coaches mainly. And everything that we do is kind of based around that dynamic trio, I would say, of voice of lived experience, occupational therapy and physical activity. And all based around centering the needs of individuals and communities who are furthest away from sport and physical activity participation. So we recognise the inequalities that exist in those barriers, and recognise that everybody has a right to engage in physical activity and sport. So we work in a range of different places and spaces, some on a more local level within leisure centre environments or primary care networks, for example, but also some more on a national space, so working alongside like the Royal College of Occupational Therapy and as a Sport England partner, for example, to try and embed physical activity across all of those different spaces and have that echoed from above. So really exciting work. We've been going for 10 years now, and yeah, now we kind of wanted to share some of our learning, and as I say, lived experience is so crucial to us as an organisation and what we do. So just some key definitions that you might hear throughout today, and throughout our kind of 1 hour together today. So the first one is lived experience. So lived experience is the knowledge and understanding that comes from personally experiencing something. So this may be relevant to the vision or beliefs of Sport for Confidence. So within our examples, it might be working with someone in partnership who has a disability and has felt excluded from sport and physical activity, and kind of having those conversations and really working with someone in partnership to think about how our service can be more relevant, more inclusive and more meaningful. We'll also use the word expert by experience, and to us, when we say this, it means a person whose first-hand lived experience gives them unique skills, insight, knowledge and expertise about a particular issue, service or challenge, and these can be positive or negative, and it might be kind of accessing a pathway, for example, or it might be living with a disability. So it comes from having lived through or navigated or been impacted by these experiences. And an involvement opportunity or activity is any opportunity where an expert by experience can influence or contribute to the decision-making, design or delivery of an activity in a way that's meaningful and on their own terms. So this is something that's really important to us at Sport for Confidence, and ensuring that we strive that all involvement opportunities and activities are meaningful. And it's important to recognise that these might look different. So these might be kind of, I guess, smaller involvement activities. It might be larger ones. So it could be focus groups, for example, it could be surveys one-to-one conversations or interviews, or it could be kind of really being involved with particular processes. So it'll look quite different depending, but there's a range of involvement activities. So a little bit about lived experience. I know I've kind of given a bit of an oversight, but I guess just thinking a bit deeper into this and recognizing that when we're talking about lived experience, we recognize that actually every person is the expert in their own lives. And lived experience shouldn't be something that's seen as like a case study or a story or a service user perspective, but actually it's so grounded in someone's experiences and shaped by their identity. We all move through the world differently, so we all have very different experiences, I guess, of identity, health, maybe disability, maybe culture, maybe kind of access to systems. And that lived experience is very individual to ourselves. It's very personal. And although two people may share a diagnosis or condition, for example, or they may be under the same service, actually their experiences, that will be very different. So it's important that we recognise that the lived experience of one individual is also not representative. We recognise that it's really great that we all do a lot of kind of CPD work, and we might do courses, for example, on autism or trauma and all of these different things, and that's great and that's so good for our development, but actually nothing can be as kind of rich and as in depth and authentic, I guess, as kind of involving experts by experience who do have that that real life experience of that. So yeah, something that's really important for us to consider. It's great that we do that work, but voice of lived experience is also so crucial and so valuable. And as I say, yeah, recognising that one person doesn't speak for everybody and represent everyone, and we really need to recognise that diversity and celebrate that difference that we all have, and difference in that kind of life experience, and view lived experience as the same level that we view professional expertise. It's an amazing skill that lots of people have, and we should be so thankful that there's that kind of value that people are sharing their lived experiences with us. And yeah, always recognise that, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a bit. I'm recognising as well that when we think of lived experience, lots of people may bring multiple layers of lived experience. So that might be around gender, disability, maybe adverse childhood experiences. However that looks, there's often kind of, or sometimes multiple layers of lived experience that people may bring. And that's really important. And I think just thinking of kind of sport and physical activity particularly, something that we often consider is the fact that often these spaces have been shaped by people who aren't necessarily furthest away from participation in that. It might be people that are already able to access these services. So the voice is so important within this space, and as much as we can involve experts by experience, it's absolutely crucial. So why lead with lived experience? And it's something that we really need to make sure is, like we've said, eventually embedded throughout organisations. It's not something that should be seen as kind of an optional extra or an add-on. Leading with lived experience really does need to be something that's so embedded throughout, and it will help to shape what we do, and I guess why we're doing it, but also how we're doing it. So the more that we involve lived experience, the more that we can make sure our organisations are relevant, more inclusive, more impactful. It's going to build confidence, make sure that we're kind of engaging people better in a way that works for them, and also support that sense of belonging, which we know is really important. And we have done one talk already as part of the series around belonging in sport and belonging in action. So we've got a new course coming soon, and as part of that, we have, for example, spoken to over 100 people who are experts by experience to make sure that it's not our kind of perception of what belonging means to us and what can support that, but actually making sure that that's truly come from voice of lived experience, and that's embedded. As I say, if we're thinking about the kind of sport and physical activity space, and it's important in every space, but there are a lot of inequalities that currently exist, which a lot of organisations that are here today will be trying to tackle, which is great. But leading by lived experience can really help us kind of understand the real barriers that people may face, and work with different individuals and communities to think about how we can lead the change, to have a better understanding of the needs and what services people really do want and what they want to be able to access, and actually can access. So the more that we can involve a range of voices and experiences, it's going to help us better reflect the communities that we serve, and also those communities that we might currently not be serving as organisations. And we find that eventually this then becomes kind of so ingrained in the organisation that it will change how the organisation looks, maybe the way that we speak and the processes and policies that we have. It also helps to make sure that our services feel more kind of relevant, as I say. But we do recognise that sometimes there might be a challenge or a kind of fear around getting it wrong. And that's very natural. And I think we've had conversations with some people who work very high up within this space and area, and they can still feel quite a weight on their shoulders, or fear of kind of getting it wrong sometimes. And there will be times where maybe we say the wrong thing, we might lack confidence or have limited resources, but we need to be very careful that fear doesn't stop us from listening to the voices of lived experience, because actually, if we don't listen and we don't create those opportunities, then those voices will remain unheard. So it's, as we talk throughout today, and it's something we'll mention a lot, it's not about perfection. It's about that progress and kind of recognizing that sometimes mistakes might happen. That's a part of learning. We need to be open, we need to be honest, and we need to be willing to adapt. So I feel like I've spoken a lot, Andy. Is there anything that you wanted to add? I've bombarded everyone with information.
Thank you, Georgia. No, it is just really important that I think I've learned through Sport for Confidence. There's that real commitment. I mean, from the senior leadership as well, to ensure the voice of lived experience plays a role in driving our practices and informing our practices too. And I mean, there is a number of examples, like the diversity inclusion action plan that we're required to produce as part of a Sport England action, and this is where we kind of ensure that there's we focus on creating safe and welcoming spaces for all, where all individuals feel valued and respected. And that's not just the participants and volunteers that we work with, but also the employees of the organisation too. So to make sure that the workforce reflects the diversity of the communities we serve, that we do continue to elevate the voice of lived experience, and we foster an equitable culture. And one of our next actions is to produce an experience, involvement and belonging strategy, which will be importantly designed alongside people with lived experience. Helps us ensure we have a standard and consistent approach to help people, particularly those we serve, to share their experiences in an accessible, inclusive manner, be involved and contribute to activities in ways that suit them, and that importantly supports and builds on their sense of belonging at Sport for Confidence.
Brilliant.
Thank you, Georgia.
Andy. Thank you. And then one other thing Andy and I also wanted to touch on as well, lived experience provides a unique lens, and it's one of the amazing skills that many people bring to the table. It doesn't define the whole person. I think this is something that's really crucial that we remember when we are working within the lived experience space. I don't know, sorry Andy, if there was anything else you wanted to kind of add here.
Thank you, George. Yes, again, I think, thinking of myself, I think lived experience is one part of someone's skills. I mean, I'm a qualified occupational therapist and fitness instructor, but also have lots of hobbies and interests, and my disability doesn't define me, but it's a very big part, an important part of my identity, and gives me unique skills, strengths and insights. And I think that's what we seek to recognise through the work with people we involve at Sport for Confidence.
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, I guess just kind of thinking a bit further about that language, identity and assumptions. So as Andy said, it is a skill, but also we need to recognise that it also takes vulnerability often for people to share their personal experiences. We're asking people to speak from their lived experience, and that might involve kind of emotional responses or thinking of difficult parts of their life, as well as sometimes it might involve positive experiences. But there is bravery in people sharing their lived experiences, and also kind of a responsibility for us in listening to that and gathering that information in whatever way that looks like. So we really need to be really cautious that we are listening openly, that we're listening respectfully, and that we're listening to learn rather than necessarily to respond in that moment. We're listening to truly understand what it is that someone's saying to us and what their experiences were. And recognising that we might not always agree with a perspective that's shared, and that's okay, but we can always approach those discussions or whatever that is with respect and curiosity and humanity, and recognise that everyone's experiences are valid. So I guess just thinking about sensitivity and language is so important. And when we think back to terms, language that we use is also very personal. So really important that when we're speaking to people, we get an understanding of the language that they would like to use about themselves. And our role is never to label people, but to see people and respect them and listen to them in a way that works for them. And the main principle I think that this kind of comes down to always is to ask and not assume. And that's something that's so crucial within this work. And we'll share a little bit later. Andy will talk a bit about team experience, as he said, and how we do this as an organisation. But actually, asking, not assuming can apply to language, it can apply to access needs, it might apply to communication preferences, someone's identity or support that they might need. So questions that can feel quite small, like actually, how can I make this experience better for you? Or what do you need from me? Although simple, they're really powerful questions. They can communicate respect, that person-centeredness, and remove those assumptions. So it's really important that even if we might have worked with someone before and we think, oh, I've got a bit of an understanding here, actually, as we said, lived experience is so personal. Everyone's experiences will be very different. So always ask someone these kind of powerful questions, in a way, support someone in a way that works for them. And that might be around kind of timing, it might be how we gather information, or thinking about how someone might like to be involved with the organisation and what their experiences are. It might be around communication or access needs, as we say. So these questions can be so powerful in so many different ways. So just really crucial that we have that at the front of our minds. And another important thing here is around feeling heard. So as we've said, it can be quite a vulnerable position that people are putting themselves in to actually share their lived experience, and it's so valuable for us as organisations when we're seeking that. But actually, it's so much more than someone being present in the room when we're having these discussions, and actually someone can be in the room or they might be asked these questions but still not feel seen or not feel heard. So it's so important that we make sure anything that we're doing is person-centred when we are having these kind of discussions and seeking voice of lived experience. And allowing people to understand that their voices have had an impact, and people need that reassurance. That's so important when we're doing these pieces of work. So actually coming back to someone and say, because of X, we have changed Z, and those kind of things. So actually that kind of you said we did, and that feedback loop is so crucial. And we have, as I say, a responsibility in listening. So actually sharing lived experience where it does involve that vulnerability, we've got the responsibility then to show around how that information and input might have been used. And if something can't change, which is sometimes the case, we recognise that organisations work within kind of different remits. It might be financial, it might be an equipment issue, whatever it is, or it might just not be suitable for the organisation. If there have been suggestions and there's reasons why something can't be changed, then be open and be honest about that, because that transparency is really going to build trust. It's really important, that power partnership, that we work with people, so kind of balance that power in the room and address that shared decision making. And one of the things when we think about kind of involvement opportunities, that even that term itself maybe has some difficulties there with power balance, because actually involvement opportunities might sound a little bit kind of dip in and out rather than being fully embedded, and we fully recognise that, and that is the term that's used currently. But I think just we need to be open and be aware and kind of reflect on, as I say, the language that we use and how we can work with, and being aware of those different things is really important. One of the things I talk about quite a lot in my work is brave spaces. I think we talk quite a lot about safe spaces, and some of you might have heard of brave spaces, but actually I just think as much as we strive to create a safe space, we have to recognise that we can't always create a fully safe space for people. And actually, as we said, there's a lot of vulnerability and courage in sharing lived experience. So actually, the more that we can try and create supportive environments, but recognise that that's still taking that vulnerability to be able to share experiences. And making sure that we offer a way out if someone feels that they kind of want to stop giving some support at any time, or that people can pause, they can step away, they can choose not to continue, and recognise that all input should be a choice. And that's really important, and kind of making that clear throughout. As I said earlier, it's important to kind of listen to respond, and sorry, not listen to respond, but listen to understand, and to truly understand what someone means and what their experience was, and ask questions in a way that's suitable to help people feel genuinely seen and heard. So key principles, and some of these will overlap with some of the things that we've said already. But one of the most important things as well was that actually it's leadership commitment, that this is coming from above. Senior leaders must be actively championing lived experience and making this valued and visible and prioritised across the organisation. It's so important. And I think it's we're fully aware that often if this is new to organisations, opportunities will start small. But the more that we can embed this across the whole organisation and get people to think in this way, actually the more power and more influence and value that's going to have. So I think even if I think about the kind of spaces that we might work with across day to day, actually if I think of a delivery site where maybe I'm working and doing a multi-sport session, it might be a small example of me actually saying to the participants there, we'll have a few minutes where we get a whiteboard out and some pictures and say, okay, well, what activities would we like to do over the next 8 weeks? Rather than just me imposing my views and the coach on kind of what activities we think might be valuable, actually making sure that we're really involving the people that are going to be accessing those activities to make sure it is meaningful and that it's what they want to be working on and activities that they're truly interested in. And then I think of kind of learning opportunities that we're involved into, as I said earlier, about belonging in action, making sure that we've involved voice of lived experience within that. So going out and speaking to over 100 people for a range of different, so some might be focus groups, some might have been telephone conversations or one-to-one conversations through doing an activity. So gathering that information again in a way that works for those people and adapting is so important. Or it might be more of a kind of system-wide where we're thinking about the DIAP, as Andy said earlier, the Diversity Inclusion Action Plan, and having involvement within that. So there's so many different opportunities, I think, on different service levels, and the more that leadership can kind of embed that throughout, it's so important. Having a clear shared purpose, I think it's so important to talk about why we're centering lived experience and what we want as a result of that, and then being open to kind of that almost challenge in a way, and having those conversations. So being open as an organisation to being questioned about maybe the things, why things are done the way they are. Involving people early is really important where possible, rather than kind of checking back at the end. And then trust and relationships is something that's so important. And I'll talk a bit more about these in a bit, but building on that trust and creating that psychological safety, as we say, giving people those opportunities to support through their voice of lived experience in a way that works for them, and maintaining strong relationships rather than it just being a one-off dip in and out activity. Actually, how can we continue to build those relationships? And then be willing to adapt processes, maybe meetings, it could be communication or expectations that are adapted. So like I said, actually that the information that we gathered recently, those 100 people have such different experiences, different communication needs, so it wouldn't have been viable for us to just have one way of collecting that information and going out and having those conversations. We needed to do that sensitively in a way that worked for those 100 people, and to offer those opportunities. So really important. And then just also thinking about the fact that this work should involve constant reflection, feedback and learning from mistakes. And I think we'll definitely kind of admit as an organisation where we might have got things wrong in the past and kind of, trying to move on from those and reflect on those. So anything you wanted to add? Sorry, Andy.
Thank you, Georgia. That's great. I mean, I couldn't talk to the wonderful opportunities I've had to work with Jake and Lindsay, our co-CEO, and Lindsay as our lead occupational therapist. And I think they've really demonstrated to me, as someone with lived experience, the passion, enthusiasm and time commitment. And I think it's been evident real genuine desire to ensure there's autonomy and co-leadership. Lindsay's often said to me around the Team Experience Initiative, you are co-leading this initiative with me, and that's really important. I want to help you develop confidence to do that. And I think there's an occupational therapist, we talk about scaffolding, helping people, that just right challenge, and help people to be involved as much as possible, as is right and is ready for them as time goes by, and actually helping people to do more as time moves forward. And I think I've really felt that, particularly working with Lindsay on Team Experience. But it's been wonderful. It's been that check and challenge approach, and the work I've done with Lindsay and Jake, that there's been that ability, and I felt comfortable to be able to ask those questions, and they've been able to explain where they may feel that things can't also be done, and what we might reasonably be able to do or not be able to do as an organisation of our size as well. So it's really been helped to be open and honest, and that the leaders look for opportunities to involve people with lived experience. I think to the recent recruitment of for the non-executive directors at Sport for Confidence, that Jake was in his role was keen to ensure that I was involved and that I had an opportunity to ask very direct questions about in the interviews about what people were doing around lived experiences, and that contributed to my decision making. I felt an equal partner in the decision making and was able to share my views, which were often different to other senior leaders, and that they were validated and taken on board in those decisions that were made. So yeah, it's really very important. But to see the senior leaders demonstrating their desire to ensure the lived experience voice is elevated throughout their organisation.
Yeah,
Thank you, Georgia.
Thank you. And yeah, I think like you said, it's so important, isn't it, to kind of make sure it's embedded across the organisation. And although that might start small, hopefully then we can change the way that we think. And I think that I feel like that's what we've kind of done over the time as an organisation, to actually think, okay, how can we involve lived experience here, and so that it becomes from the beginning, like you say, rather than at the end. So that's brilliant. Thank you. I just wanted to talk a little bit as well about how we value lived experience. So yeah, I just think it's so important if we're valuing the voice, and as I say, we need to value this alongside professional knowledge. So if we value the voice, we also need to value the person behind it. And again, conscious we've got an hour today, so it's a very kind of quick whistle-stop tour, unfortunately. But there's a lot of resources out here that you can look into. So one of the things is fair remuneration. So actually thinking about kind of the time, maybe the expenses or the travel that people have had to have in order to support, and also that kind of, as we say, that vulnerability and that almost that emotional impact sometimes of sharing lived experience, and recognizing that is a unique skill in itself and how we value that. So we recognise that not every organisation is able to provide this, and some organisations no one might be paid, but I just think if we're paying consultants and we're paying trainers or facilitators, actually lived experience needs to be recognised within that same way, and that's really important. So this is something that we've created across different spaces as remuneration policies, and just something that I would kind of recommend looking into. It is something that we're really ingraining. Next thing around, I think about skills and opportunities. So I just often think about actually, okay, it might be that we can offer paid opportunities, and if we can, and if we can't, actually something else that's really important is offering those development opportunities. So again, understanding what's important to that person, what their goals are, and what they're wanting to work on, to think about any training or skill development that we can offer. Maybe it's around public speaking opportunities, whether there's any opportunity for mentoring or coaching, or progression potentially into paid roles. And this is something that we've created a lot of pathways as an organisation to support, or whether there's opportunities around supporting the board or advisory groups. So just thinking about what those opportunities are, and also thinking about how someone might enjoy recognition and how they best take that, because actually for some people, having just like a little email that's sent that's really positive feedback can be really great. For other people, they really might like having a certificate and an awards evening. So kind of think about the people that we work with, and think about actually, are there opportunities there that we can recognise people? It might be a shout out in the newsletter or those kinds of things. But kind of thinking about that and how that's important, and again trying to make sure all of these things are as person-centred as possible. Choice and flexibility we've mentioned a bit, but just thinking about those different ways for people to contribute, and how we can adapt. So not having one kind of set way to involve voice of lived experience, but recognising that we've all got different experiences, different communication needs. So actually, how can we involve people in a way that works for them and adapt to that? Understand that some opportunities might be paid, some might be voluntary, some might be more one-off opportunities, and having that opportunity, as we say, to step back where needed safely, or to respect people's capacity and energy, and recognise that may change, and that may change kind of day to day or hour to hour, and it's really important to recognise that. Also thinking a bit about people who may be taking on the information, whether there's any support for those people. So whether there's support for someone who's actually seeking that voice of lived experience and gathering some quite sensitive, maybe sometimes quite difficult information, So for the experts by experience and those individuals, is there access to support? Is there reflective supervision, and what support's in place? As I think that can often be overlooked. And reflection and feedback is something that we'll always talk a lot about, but yeah, share those outcomes, capture the learning, and let's continue to review. As I say, it's not a one-off task or activity. This is something that we need to keep doing and reviewing. Yeah, any thoughts to add on that, Andy, around value of lived experience?
Thank you, Georgia. Yeah, it's really just providing choice to people and flexibility. I think often there's the desire, and importantly, to provide remuneration around activities and opportunities, but that might not always be possible. But I think when that is the case, to provide those opportunities, to explaining why it may not be so, but to give them the choice also as whether they may want to take part or not, because they may, through those opportunities, be able to create impact and value that's really important to them. But yes, trying to get that feedback, provide that opportunities to get that, and to ensure that people know what's happening in the work we're doing and activities, initiatives that are going on. Thank you, Georgia.
Thank you. And yeah, really good point. I think payment isn't always suitable, possible, and we're aware of that. So yeah, making sure those opportunities aren't missed and those voices still aren't missed out because of that. Because for some people it's still empowering and they want to share their voice and their experiences. So yeah, brilliant point. Thank you. So just wanted to touch a little bit on potential pitfalls, and again this will kind of overlap with what we've spoken about a little bit, but the reason I say pitfalls as well is that they're not usually it's not usually intentional. It often comes from good intentions, but maybe a lack of kind of structure or lack of time that's been put into leading with lived experience. So actually these are some things where maybe sometimes we could make mistakes, and as organizations often these are some things that come up. So some of these are involving people too late. So as I said earlier, kind of involving people once decisions have already been made, and that can actually leave quite little room then to actually shape any outcomes, and might feel to experts by experience like it's more of a validation rather than a true collaboration, and also maybe a little bit tokenistic. So I think it's really important that actually where possible we involve experts by experience from the beginning, to make sure that it is truly that their kind of experiences and views are truly shaping things, rather than it being more of a tick box check back exercise at the end. As one of the other things I've said is where feedback is collected and not used. So that might be surveys or focus groups, or having discussions and one-to-one around personal stories or experiences. And actually, if there's no visible actions or follow-up, or nothing's ever comes from that, then actually trust can be lost quite quickly. And I feel that actually that could almost be more harmful than not having ever had those conversations in the first place, because someone's been vulnerable and kind of very open and honest and sharing their experiences, and then when we're not done anything with that, or maybe we have but we haven't communicated that back, so actually it's so important that we use that feedback where possible, and if we haven't, as I say, that we're honest about that and why. And even examples I think of the fact that these could be quite big or small. So even the example I shared earlier around in multi-sport sessions, where I'll speak to participants and say, what kind of activities would we like to do in the next 8 weeks? If I then went and did 8 completely different activities that were not related to what we discussed in that discussion, then actually that's going to really break down that trust for a lot of people, many of whom may already have had trust kind of eroded within systems or had difficult experiences and building forming relationships. So I think that's so crucial, and something to be cautious of, and again doesn't often come from bad intentions. I recognize that it's normally due to kind of capacity, but just so important. As we said earlier, not having kind of one person representing an entire community, but being aware that that's one person's experiences still, and that there's a diversity of voices, and we need to celebrate difference, and recognise that. So lived experience is personal and not representative. And again, kind of avoiding that tick box one-off consultation, but actually trying to make it something that's so embedded throughout the organisation and have all of these different opportunities, so that people really do feel like you're working together and you're coming up with the solutions or maybe changes or impact together as part of that decision, and that working with, which Andy spoke to earlier, is so important. And yeah, just kind of thinking about where that information goes. So I guess the biggest pitfall is kind of not gathering this information and or seeking this expert by experience opinions and experiences and then not doing anything with that. So it's just really important to think about how people have been involved and how that was meaningful. So conscious of time, we just wanted to give a couple of examples. How are we doing? We've got 20 minutes left. Perfect. Just wanted to give a couple of examples really of how we've embedded voice of lived experience across our organisation. Of course, this isn't all of them, but we just wanted to give kind of 2 examples in different spaces. So the first one we're going to talk about, and as this is your your kind of space, Andy, I'll allow you to, if that's okay.
Thank you, Georgia. Yes, so actually, so one way of creating involvement in base initiatives is through something called team experience, and it essentially is an expert by experience team, a team of experts by experience. It's an occupational therapist and lived experience led initiative. It's importantly, it's strengths-based, and it involves the use of a personal profile that's been designed with an occupational therapy lens that we occupational therapists complete alongside people with lived experience, and where they can share their strengths, skills, and expertise from their experiences, and importantly, how they may like to contribute and be involved in ways that are meaningful for them and that are on their own terms. And from that information, then we work together to identify and share relevant involvement activities and learning opportunities that people may not want to be involved, but again, it is their choice. And we then also work as an organisation to celebrate the achievements of people with lived experience and in ways that we've worked together and in ways that we've learned that they have been involved in other initiatives outside the organisation too. And that all comes under this kind of our words here, play your part. So we have to ask people to play your part, and again that part is in ways that part will be very different to different people, so we recognise that as an organisation, and that's importantly why we do use those 3 words. Thank you.
Brilliant, thank you. And then I think next we have an example actually of
a
few of the pages.
Yes, so this is an example here of the personal profile, the template that we've developed, and so it could sort of give you an overview of the kind of sorts of questions that we use, and you'll see there it's kind of this strengths based. There's a couple of questions and they're often similar, but you have those there, so we give people different ways of being able to answer the questions, that because we recognise some may be more suitable for others, for different people, and it focuses on the insight, skills, and how someone might like to contribute, and it's ensuring people are seen as individuals and involved as individuals, and as I've said before, in ways that are meaningful for them, and importantly, on their own terms.
Brilliant, thank you. And yeah, I think that's so important, isn't it? It's that starting with the person, like we've said a lot, like on someone's own terms, and kind of having that opportunity to be involved in a way that works for them, and rather than just saying, can you come and share your story or check this, actually it's so ingrained in making sure it's meaningful. And yeah,
quite
brilliant.
Yes, it's not asking people to contribute in the same way, but in different ways that suit them best.
Brilliant, thank you, Andy.
Thank you, Georgia.
And then I just wanted to share another example from our organisation around Modest Waves. So Modest Waves is an initiative, and it was based off, we had a Muslim lady who was in a caring role, and she was seeking occupational therapy support to access physical activity, and one of the things that had been recommended to her clinically was swimming, but actually through discussion it was realised that there's quite a few significant barriers that were identified through her lived experience. So through doing that, a lot of the ones that were kind of having those discussions, a lot of the barriers that were identified were around cultural and religious considerations around modesty, a need for a women-only environment, fear of judgment in mixed gender spaces, a lack of modest swimwear options available, and limited cultural appropriate facilities. So through those kind of conversations and that recognition and that story almost, we work then in partnership with the individual, Sport for Confidence, Everyone Active and Active Essex to create the Modest Waves initiative. So that programme included weekly women's only swim sessions. Don't know why I struggled with that so much. Female lifeguards, creating a culturally safe environment, so ensuring that there was space for prayer, that there was protected time during Ramadan, and that spaces kind of continue to keep that pool, even when numbers were lower, that the pool was still available and protected during Ramadan time. That there was ongoing feedback with the participant and with the other ladies who started to attend, and later an addition of swimming sessions or swimming lessons was put in place, because actually that's something that once the ladies were in the water, they then felt that actually it would be really valuable to have some swimming lessons. So it's been a very collaborative piece of work. I believe now around kind of 17 attendees attend per month, or every kind of week. And actually, it's also led into employment and leadership through instructor qualifications, which has been really brilliant. So I think it's just a really, hopefully quite nice example of a way that by working with someone and seeking that voice of lived experience and having those conversations, we've been able to move from having that story to actually full system change and shaping the access and shaping the design, and shaping the service, and also offering those future opportunities as well, which is so important, as we said earlier. So just some key takeaways from what we've spoken about today. And again, I am conscious that it's a massive topic to have in a short space of time. So please do reach out to us afterwards if there's anything else that we can support with. But recognising that meaningful change does take time. It's not going to be an overnight change, and it shouldn't be, because it's something that should be kind of continuously reviewed. So we recognise that, but start with the purpose, start with the why, start with understanding the people who are experts by experience and how they might like to be involved and how that looks. And as we said, start as early as possible when we're thinking of those opportunities, forming that relationships and trust. So as Andy said, actually team experience has become a real collaborative space now, where everyone can kind of share their experiences, but we also celebrate each other, we celebrate difference, we understand that person, and that's so important. Recognising that it is a space that does need to be well resourced. We do need to put time, we need to put effort into this. It can't just be an add-on. Embedding lived experience across an organisation is so important. So we do need to make sure that's coming, as we said earlier, from like leaders above, and being embedded into the organisation and being spoken about and being valued truly across every space, which is so important. And always striving for meaningful involvement. So brilliant. I'll hand over to you, Andy, if that's okay, just in case there's any key takeaways you've thought of from throughout the discussions today.
Thank you very much, Georgia. I think it's just the three words there, I think, would be the key takeaway that I want to include to the additional comments you've made. It's just, again, we're striving for meaningful involvement and involving people on their own terms, and play your part is something that's very important to us. Thank you, Georgia.
Brilliant. Thank you, Andy. I guess just a bit of a reflection that we wanted to leave you with today is just thinking about who isn't in the room or who isn't at the table currently within your organisation. So whose perspectives aren't currently present, or is there people who may be facing barriers to attending? And just trying to kind of think about this a bit as an organisation or as an individual, and how we might be able to shape this going forward. And I just think this is really important, particularly in organisations where we're supporting diverse populations sometimes. If certain voices aren't heard and they're absent, then our decisions are only going to reflect maybe our views or part of a community. So actually, the more that we can involve a range and, like we say, celebrate that diversity and difference, and the more positive impact that's going to have on our organisation, us as individuals, and also the people that are accessing our service. So just kind of a thought to take with you after today. And here's just some useful resources. So there is a lot out there, but these are some that I find quite helpful and have used quite a bit. So thinking about the Mind, Influence and Participation Toolkit, that's got a bit of a what, why and how. Some really useful resources and examples on there of how they embed voice of lived experience. The new Philanthropy, I can never say that word, capital. They've got a really useful toolkit around centering lived experience and guidance for system partners, so I can send this out to yourselves, but it's got a really kind of useful toolkit and step-by-step guide. And then Shaping Our Lives is a really important one. So this organisation is led by Voice of Lived Experience and Experts by Experience. And it's really helpful to support organisations on how to embed lived experience throughout your organisation. And there's got, for example, you can see in the screenshot, My Voice Matters, which is a guide for people wanting to share their lived experience. And I definitely recommend having a read through that. They've also got involvement activity profiles, for example, and a list of opportunities and a bank of opportunities actually that people can access on their website. So again, just a really nice positive example there that I'd recommend having a look at. And that is it from us. Again, very whistle-stop tour, but I'll stop sharing for a minute so if there was any questions, and I can put our email in the chat. Oh, I can see people, which is nice.
Georgia, Andy, thank you very much. Thought-provoking, super session as always with you guys. We've had a question come in the quality Q&A section, which I'll ask in a second. Please do use this next couple of minutes to have a think about some questions that you may have for Georgia or Andy. Please make use of this time while we have the guys in the virtual room. A question we did have come in, and I think this is it'll be really useful actually. So Luke has asked, have you had any potential challenges where, say, you're working with your team of experts by experience that have different or even conflicting views, ideas or suggestions, and that's based on their individual experiences? So has that come up? And even if it hasn't, kind of say if there's organizations like really inspired by your talk today and that pops up for them, kind of how would you kind of advise they overcome that if it does?
Yeah, I mean, I've definitely had experiences where I've been doing focus groups, and I think one of the things that we were talking about a lot, it was focused around an online module, was language around person with a, so that kind of person first or identity first, so person with a disability or disabled person, and actually that was something that often people within the room disagreed on. So it can be sometimes quite difficult to when we're trying to come up with solutions, but actually I think it's so valuable that people do hear different people's opinions as well, and kind of sharing that at the time and recognizing that's why we're all in the room. We've all got different experiences, we've all got different insights, and that's why it's so important to bring those together. But I think, yeah, that was definitely kind of one of the big disagreements. And I think actually it's just, again, if we can create that space where it's actually we're having those conversations and we're creating that brave space almost, people are quite willing to have those conversations generally and kind of talk to each other about why they feel a certain way and why they might use a particular term and someone else doesn't. So I think it's kind of managing that in a way that we're creating that safe space where people are feeling comfortable to share their views and there's no judgment there, and almost kind of, if it was within a group environment, setting those kind of preterms of actually there's no judgment within the space today. We've all got different experiences. That's why people in the room are experts by experience, and recognizing that everyone's experiences will be different. I don't know if there's anything you want to add, Andy, but
thank you, Georgia. It's really a good question. I think as Georgia has alluded to, is that respect for difference of thought and opinion, and helping people understand that in any interaction that we do have different thoughts and opinions, and people bring different levels of experience, but also challenges and needs to any conversation or involvement activity, and that we as a whole need to respect that. And I think we're fortunate at Sport for Competence, I suppose, that there are occupational therapists who work more closely often with lots of different people we work with, who can then provide that additional level of support to people who may need that, to ensure that their voices feel heard and respected. I mean, there is always the challenge. There will be dominant voices in the room. It's trying to ensure those voices are heard, but but also ensuring there's a diverse range of voices.
And Andy, I think you both articulated brilliantly that move away from a safe space to a brave space, and the conditions of a brave space, and how you can really make that really clear, and I guess that kind of feeds into your daily practice as well with that as well.
Sure. Yes, I think George said it, but we can never really truly create that safe space because that's very different for different people. But yeah, just recognizing that, making sure that people are aware about that, but that we create that brave space and where people can feel as confident as possible to be able to be involved in ways again that suit them and then are on their terms.
Yeah, and I think sometimes having that discussion at the start, isn't it, of kind of actually like there will be lots of conversation today, but yeah, recognise again we've all got different experiences and be sensitive about the language that we use, to try and make sure that people don't use language necessarily that might offend someone, and like there's maybe not the intention to harm, but I think just kind of almost setting that pretense if it is going to be a group discussion on how that might look, and kind of the respect for each other, and creating that brave space is just so crucial for this.
Thanks, Georgia. Thanks, Andy. I think Miriam has a question.
Hi guys. I just wanted to say this has been incredible. I think it's exactly what we needed as an organisation to kind of hear, in the sense that we are, a global majority. I'm going to say it with chest because we're doing our lived experience training, but we're a global majority organisation. So we target those that maybe don't access physical activity and provisions because of their race or because of their cultural background and things like that. And it's really incredible actually to, we're quite a new organisation, and we kind of not even get bogged down, but I'm here for the passion to give as many people opportunities as possible that don't normally get them. And where we have to do that as a leader of an organisation, where we have to do all the sort of the back office stuff, whether it's getting our books together and making sure this safeguarding and all of that is so important, but it's really nice to sort of go back to why we're doing this, and to hear this kind of to hear that it's okay to actually, with chest, own our lived experience. It's just kind of given me a little bit of inspiration again to kind of own where I sit and the tapestry that is me, that I have that to add to my organisation, and so do all the individuals, and that honing in that choice and that importance of every voice really does matter. I think the mundane we kind of forget, and you just want to get the job done, you want to make sure your registers are done, you want to make sure that you're getting that, but I think that zeal for getting that footfall back in as well, it's just so I don't know, I just feel like this is so exciting. I can't wait to get off the call and phone Jordan and just say like, right, let's get back on this, because it was so good and so informative. So I just want to say thank you for kind of refreshing that with us, really, that we're doing the right thing, we're in the right place, and that our lived experience really does matter. So I just wanted to say thank you more than anything, that this is kind of, although it was a snapshot, it was exactly what I needed to, right, this is why we're here, and this is why we're doing what we're doing. So thank you.
Brilliant. No, thank you, and thank you so much for coming along today and for sharing your insights afterwards. And I think, like you say, it can be really difficult. There's so much to do day to day, and that's why when we talk about the pitfalls and stuff, like, they never come from bad intentions. We all want to, we've got that passion, which is why we're here, right? But we can be up against systems where sometimes, for like Leisure Centre, for example, their priorities might be in a different place to where ours are as an organisation. So it is often that advocacy, and I think that's so important in the work that we do, and trying to kind of advocate with that voice of lived experience, and it's so important. So thank you for sharing, and thanks for coming.
Brilliant. Thank you, Miriam. Thank you for your contribution there. I'm going to have just one final question, because I don't think we've got plenty of positive feedback coming through the chat. But Sport for Confidence, inclusive by design organisation, play your part is there to be seen, and it comes through really clearly. For some of the other organisations, and I think there was something in the chat from Kelly around, actually it feels local government as a kind of sector is a long way away from really understanding this and having this as kind of business as usual. Kind of what would your say, if I've been on the call today, I've been really inspired by the two of you, I really want to take this away and embed this into my day-to-day practice, or speak to other leaders in my organisation, or even I am the leader in my organisation, I want to start to really think about how do I embed this as our core business as usual. What would your top tips be, or just like a piece of advice around how to just start that, or just get the ball rolling? Like, what would be your best piece of advice just to do to start off?
Do you want me to go first, Andy?
Go on, Georgia. Yes.
Unless you big question. I think for me it would be kind of reviewing the organisation currently, thinking about where we're at, and that coming back to that question that Andy and I posed of actually who's not in the room currently. So almost like auditing and thinking about that journey. And I think this is something we've spoken about in a few other, but actually thinking about ways that lived experience can be involved. And like I said, it can start off with those small things. It might be kind of thinking about the activity and asking questions about, okay, what activities are we going to be doing and why are we doing those? So it's not us always imposing what we think might be beneficial. And then it can also be more of that policy, service design. So I think it's so important to kind of think about all those different spaces, but start having those conversations, I think, is the main thing. Start thinking with leaders, or if you are the leader, speak within your team about lived experience. And the more that we can start talking about that and how we can embed it, hopefully everyone will have ideas and we can bring those together. And don't expect it to be an overnight change, I would say. Like it's going to be constant, it's going to be something that you keep reviewing. But I think that's what's so exciting about it. And like we say, like the language will change. But I think, my top tip would be just kind of start having those conversations, start thinking about your organisation and how that might look, and all those different kind of spaces that you work within. Sorry, Andy, I think.
I think you put it any better, really, Georgia. Thank you. I think it's just, that honesty and that desire, that passion, and also that just, not have that fear to get it wrong as a speaker, as a disabled person, that will come through in the work that hopefully people would seek to do, and that you just make clear your intentions, and that perhaps this is where you're at, and this is where we want to be together and work with people lived experience to get to together. But it's okay, I suppose, to have some level of fear about it as well.
Yeah, very true.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much for that advice, Andy and Georgia. Really appreciate it. I will close today's session by just saying a massive thank you to you both and to Sport for Confidence for steering us through the lived experience leadership session today. I have put in the chat function a feedback survey, so please do, if you do have two minutes, that will really support both the evaluation for Sport for Confidence around their kind of whole workforce program that they're working on, and then I've also put in a link to the chat for future online learning series sessions. So coming up, we have a legal compliance session, we have an asset-based community development session, and also a legal structures and e-portal, which are coming up at the end of this month and into May as well. So please do take a look at them. And that leaves me to say thank you very much for spending your time with us this afternoon. Have a great rest of your day, and hopefully see you on a call soon. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
And I'm going to end event.
Yeah.